Hello, everyone. This is Dr. David Chandros with an update on psychedelic gamification. This will be the third video to get you started in this new field of game design for learning using insights gleaned from the emerging field of psychedelic psychotherapy. I'm going to mention a couple of things before we look at a few slides that'll help you out today understanding mystical experience and how mystical experience is core to learning and must be core to learning. Otherwise, learning is not connected to a wider world. The games that we tend to produce that are in the form of a psychedelic narrative or psychedelic experience are ones which are designed to produce, if possible, a sense of awe or wonder or a sense of self-reflection. Awe and wonder are really what we're looking at because this is more of an emotional element that we want to bring out in the design. So let's have a look at what we mean by awe and wonder and how this can be measured. The games that we produced to this point include a game, The Carthage Chronicles, which we've discussed in other videos. It's being used across Ontario now for long-term care training. Another game which was called Hypatia, based on the historical character Hypatia, the first legitimate female professor in the Alexandrian city, ancient Alexandria. And then we went on to produce a game called Possibilities, which is set in the 1930s as you travel the world to look for the secrets of the neurophysiology of the brain. And that is produced for people in a program where they have dementia with maybe a year or two to live, but they want to optimize and completely let them flourish during that time. It's called Possibilities. It's a program that runs at Baycrest Health Sciences. So what we're looking at here are mystical experience scales on the screen. And as you can see, there are many different types of mystical experience scale. There's a big 100 item, there's a 30 item. But what these look at is a way to define mystical experience. And these are used in psychedelic research. So and as you can see, they all have different elements in them: feelings of peace and tranquility, tenderness and gentleness, experience of amazement, a sense of reverence, experience of timelessness, the experience of an insight that all is one. You do not have to take psilocybin to have these experiences. Psilocybin amplifies these through massive synaptic diffusion. And the area of the brain that might generate mystical experience is probably, we're zeroing in the research. Here I'm using the almighty we, in the claustrum, which is an area in sort of the inside of the hemispheres, the bottom and the inside of the hemispheres. And the claustrum seems to assemble reality for us from what we know. So we have sensory input. These come in from the body and from the special senses. They go to an area first called the thalamus. The thalamus says, oh, you're hearing, we're going to send you to this part of the brain, or you're visual, we're going to send you to the back of the brain. And all of this stuff is coordinated along with the frontal cortex into reality. And we think the claustrum has a lot to do with it. So maybe. So what's important here is that when you design psychedelic games, you're going to try to promote these feelings. How can you, with video, with audio, with role playing, with reading, whatever it takes to have your learners get some of these elements, these mystical elements for themselves. So have a look at mystical experience scales and say, how can my learners go through this kind of emotional story in which mystical events are the key learning experiences rather than sadness, happiness, and other simple kinds of feelings. What is a mystical experience? Well, generally, it's a feeling of timelessness, which you should be able to achieve. If your game is engaging enough, you should be able to pull them into so involved in time, they might not even know they're playing till 3 a.m. A lot of us gamers know what you're talking about there. Oneness, a sense of connectedness or unity. You've got to build the game narrative and the game experiences around the idea of oneness. That in the back of your head, as you write the game story, you yourself believe in oneness. Even if you don't really believe in it, you have to assume it to even be a decent character developer. Noetic. Noetic means revelation of knowledge. Well, isn't a learning game about that anyways? So, for example, in Hypatia and Carthage, we might have you going to visit the Druids, and this is set in 830 BC. And you're on a mission that's sent to you in a dreamscape. And you eventually end up meeting the Druids, and the Druids are the high priests of the northern people, and they're a nature based. This is where mistletoe, a lot of Christmas comes from the idea of these Nordic cultures and the Druidic cultures. So you could visit a druid and have the druid give you a cup of tea in one of our games. And when you cup the tea, the world begins to spin. You essentially, I put them on an acid trip, but I don't call it that. And I don't make it like LSD. It's my version of what a cup of some wisdom potion that produces this revelation of knowledge. So you enter the world, which they called in those days, King Arthur, the other world. And that's what Stonehenge and Woodhenge more so is all about. There's a parallel reality that we call Avalon later on, called the other world. And so you actually are able to enter the other world by drinking this magic brew, this concoction you get from the Druids. And that reveals more knowledge about healing arts. So in this game, you're visiting different continents to gather spheres of healing. The spheres are obtained by learning how to use methods to help people. So you're essentially, again, using learning experiences tied to the game story. And the other is no sense of self. They call it Satori Sunyata Fana, the idea that there is no ego, that you are kind of an illusion. And this is something that even deGrasse Tyson speaks about, the idea that we may be characters in a futuristic video game. So what if there's no sense of self for your character in the game and you're really a part of something greater than yourself? Then you begin to get a psychedelic imagery as you build. Now remember, psychedelic gamification can be about psychedelics. It could be a game to help you if you're a psychotherapist wanting to use psychedelics, but you haven't been trained and there's nobody teaching it anywhere and you're competent, you need to use it, then the game could actually assist you with it. You could produce a game that teaches mental health professionals what psychedelics do. And you could have a game that you could produce for people that have done a psychedelic session. Remember, psychedelic psychotherapy is usually 1 or 2 sessions of something like psilocybin. You never take it again. It just opens up insights. Afterwards, you have this assimilation phase, this integration phase, where you have to integrate whatever you've learned in the psychedelic session into your life and actualize it. So you can have an app that you would build that would assist a patient to go through integration. Or you might not find a psychedelic therapist anywhere in the world and you're willing to take a chance on the curandero or the ayahuasca leader in your neighborhood. All illegal, but that's never stopped anyone with mushroom dispensaries, has it? You might want an app to help guide you so that it goes well. So there's different ways of talking about psychedelic games. The one I'm talking about is using these principles in your classroom with kids or adults, building on these principles. So you can see that if we look at a psychedelic landscape, we have body experiences of psychedelic. That's very hard to get without actually using psychedelics. But what you can get for bodily self-experience, you could do with having a drumming session during class where all the kids drum for about 5 minutes and they chant, some interesting set of chant. You could talk to an indigenous leader and with respectful permission, all do a basic strawberry dance or some kind of chant that could be led in a respectful way so that your body is actually involved in dancing and moving. And in that movement, ask any Tai Chi master, there is an expansive psychedelic state. Then there's the mental self-experience of what thoughts you have and who you want to see yourself at in the game environment. So again, the hallmarks of any mystical experience we want to build into the game design is there's no words to describe this. I know this is the truth I've encountered. It's something special. I can remember what happened even years later. And I didn't cause this. It all just happened. This comes from William James in his original book, The Varieties of Psychedelic Experience. So when you're producing, again, psychedelic games, you are using the mystical state of consciousness to try to evoke it. This is the kind of photography you could use. And again, anything I'm showing you is used, we have authored licensed copies we purchased from Adobe Creative Stock. We have to as a teaching hospital. So this is the kind of stuff you can find in Adobe Stock. I mean, this is pretty psychedelic stuff. And this, along with some interesting music, tablas or maybe Gregorian chants, these can cause induction of artistic states. You don't need to program psychedelic games in 3D with a programmer. You can do most of this on your learning management system. Yes, good old Moodle or D2L or Blackboard. We built some of our most powerful games on WordPress blogs in the beginning. The question is, do you have the imagination? And you need to consult this literature to get an idea of how to use it. And again, we talked about this in the last video, but I just wanted to show you what the data was. Scientists collect data from 4,200 people around the world. They talked about God encounter experiences. 75% of their groups rated finding God was the most amazing thing that has ever happened to their life. Consciousness, benevolence, intelligence, sacredness, and eternal existence. You have to, again, even if you don't believe in this stuff, or you're of a faith that doesn't talk this way, you need to be prepared to work this way. And I would start with reading a paper like this. This is Religious-Based Interventions for Depression, Systematic Review. So when you get religion, a remarkable number of people stop being depressed. A remarkable number of people, when they get faith, are able to join Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the conditions is to believe in a higher being. So it is this idea of your encounter. So in the game, you don't have to have God. You could call it Bazubi. And it could be somewhere in the game you meet this all-knowing entity. And this entity then becomes your guide in the game. And as you travel through the game world, the world that you've built around your character, you could be exposed to these spiritual ideas. As we said, further reading to try to understand the psychedelic experience, probably the best that's out there is LSD in the Mind of the Universe, Diamonds from Heaven by Christopher Bakke. That's the last of our basic psychedelic game design videos. We're going to give you examples of other games we built using these designs. And again, if you don't want to use the word psychedelic in your classroom, which most of you won't, use the word the numinous type of game. Remember, a numinous game is one in which you encounter something greater than yourself, and through it you learn more about who you are. And I don't think any principal or school administrator anywhere in the world would object to that. David Chandra signing off. I hope you've had a good time today on our little adventure. See you next time.